I need to go outside and experience the magic of the fresh air off the moor. I don't live anywhere near a moor. I don't really know what a moor is. Hi besties, I hope you're doing well. Today, we are gonna dive into the 20th century's teenage years. We're gonna talk about all things 1910 to 1919, but most specifically, the most historically important books from that era. For me personally, this is a decade I often forget about. Like, besides World War I, I'm like, besides one of the most major global events in history, it's pretty much forgotten about. But besides World War I feel like we don't hear a ton about what the culture was like during the 1910s, what was happening on the home front, what the literature was like, because we were so honed in on the war. So while we're definitely not going to get through this video without touching on World War I, we're also going to talk about a lot of other things regarding the decade. If you missed my first video in this series in which I read like it was the turn of the century, I highly suggest you watching that first because watching them in order is going to provide you with even more historical context. And even though glasses were invented nearly 700 years before the time that we're going to be studying this week, I still am so excited to give a major shout out to the sponsor of today's video, which is glassesusa.com. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you probably already know all the amazing things about glassesusa.com, but in case you don't, I'll hook you up. Because glassesusa.com cuts out the middleman, they offer over 9,000 pairs of in-house brand frames, designer brand frames for prescription glasses and sunglasses at up to 70% off the retail price. You can shop for all your eyewear needs, glasses, contacts, sunglasses, from the comfort of your own home at incredibly affordable prices. Shopping at glassesusa.com is also a completely risk-free experience. They offer free shipping and returns, a 100% money-back guarantee, and a full year of product warranty. Glassesusa.com even has a quiz that can help you determine what frame shapes, what style of glasses are right for you to get you looking, feeling, and seeing your best. You see what I did there? One thing that I use every single time I shop at glassesusa.com is their virtual try-on tool. This allows me to see what the frames will actually look like on my face. Now I'll show you the frames I chose this time around. First, the ones I'm wearing right now are the Ottoto Waterloo frames. They look so delicate and feminine, but they're really sturdy. I'm obsessed with these, and they're so comfortable too. Then I have the ottoto piero frames, and I just feel like they really accentuate my eyes and my natural face shape. Also, I call these my Misty Quigley glasses. The girls who get it, get it. And then for sunglasses this time around, stop. Audrey Hepburn who? I am obsessed with these. They're the Amelia Natalie frames. Genuinely, these are the best pair of sunglasses I've ever had. Most sunglasses just are not protective enough for me. These I put on and nobody can touch me. The sun cannot touch me. It cannot penetrate these bad boys. If you like any of these frames or you want to look for any others, you can click the link in my description and get 65% off your first pair at glassesusa.com. Just like last time, I'm reading 4 books this week, and just like last time, I'm going to read them in chronological order of publication date so that I can feel a little bit more like I'm going through the decade. First up, The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Next, published in 1913, I'll be reading O Pioneers by Willa Cather. Skipping forward a few years, we have The Magnificent Ambersons by Booth Tarkington. And last but not least, published in 1919, I have Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. Before we get into the reading vlog, let's go talk to Professor Sally about the historical context of the decade and the historical context of these 4 books. Professor Sally clocking in for the day. I talked a lot in the last video about the labor union movement and how workforces were coming together to try to fight capitalist and corporate interests and instead keep the means of production in the hands of the workers. This truly laid the foundation for socialist movements for years to come, and it didn't stop as soon as that decade ended. The labor union movement kept persisting throughout the 1910s. For example, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened in 1911 in New York City. Many people died and were injured, and that was a huge inciting incident for the labor union movement to latch onto and demand better working conditions. There still wasn't a ton of government action at the time, but the movement kept gaining traction throughout this decade. Globalization was also increasing in terms of more automobiles being made and manufactured, railroads being built and used more frequently, and massive ocean liners were making cross-continental travel much more popular, but they were not immune to tragedy. This is the decade in which we see the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, killing well over 1,000 people. Additionally, we can't talk about this decade without talking about World War I. European military aggression was in full swing, culminating in World War I from 1914 to 1919. In terms of America, the United States entered the war in 1917, pretty much for purely capitalist reasons, because they wanted to be able to conquer foreign markets. Woodrow Wilson described his goal of entering the war as an open door to the rest of the world, which was very imperialist of him. The war did act as a unifying event on the home front, but a lot of that had to do with the government using the war as a distraction from the growing divide between lower, middle, and upper class individuals. Towards the end of the decade, from about 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu pandemic killed millions of people worldwide. It's interesting to think about that from today's perspective, living currently in another global pandemic, and to see that we still tend to handle them incredibly poorly. Let's talk about the historical context of each of the novels that we're going to be reading. The Secret Garden was originally published in 1910, and it was published serially, which meant that it came out in multiple parts in a newspaper or magazine, but was published in novel form in 1911. Frances Hodgson Burnett did live in America for a long time, but this novel is set in Britain. It does show glimpses of the British Empire's imperial rule because Mary's coming from India back to England, and she talks about her views of the native people in India and how she sees them as servants as opposed to, you know, fully complex and realized individuals. This book also reflects Burnett's interest in something called New Thought. The thesis statement behind New Thought was the idea that positive thinking and communing with nature can work in conjunction as a healing process. Very OG manifestation girly of her. Then we have O Pioneers by Willa Cather, which was published in 1913, so a couple years later. My dog did rip the cover off of this, so thanks, girl. This book is the first in Cather's Great Plains trilogy. All three of these novels in large part reflect Willa Cather's own time on a homestead in Nebraska filled with European immigrant farmers. In fact, she said, "I decided not to write at all, simply to give myself up to the pleasure of recapturing in memory people and places I'd forgotten." Even though it's a fictionalized account, there are aspects of it that are very memoir-esque. When these books were published, they were heralded as some of the best writing about the American West, and people thought that Cather had a very uniquely American voice, and that she captured westward expansion, colonialism, better than any other author had up until this point. Next, we have The Magnificent Amber Sins, published in 1918. This actually won the Pulitzer Prize at the time. This book really focuses on the changes that increasing industrialization and the new automobile age had in sort of Midwest towns, in which a very startling class divide started to crop up between old money and new money residents. It's a book all about class and about how progress was sometimes detrimental to the already rich. And finally, we have Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson, published in 1919. This book sort of dipped its toes in the pool of modernism, which was coming very soon after it was published, in that it relied a lot less on plot and more on the psychological development and flaws of the characters that it discusses. As people talked about all the dangers and horrors happening in big American cities, Sherwood Anderson felt that there was a tendency to over-romanticize small-town American life, and this book was his attempt to really undermine that and show the underbelly of small-town America that people were sort of overlooking. Let's dive into the books and I'll catch up with you later.
It is such a beautiful day outside. So my plan for the day is to stay out here and read The Secret Garden, and then I do need to film my video for this week, but hopefully it won't take too long. After that, I really want to take Athena on a walk at the river. Let's get to reading The Secret Garden. Okay, so I finished The Secret Garden earlier today. Really liked it and enjoyed myself. And now I'm gonna start Oh Pioneers. When it got here, I was so excited because I was like, oh, it's so short. It's only like 115 pages. And then I saw the font. That's small. Let's go. I'm in such a reading slump. I'm trying to get through Oh Pioneers, and I was like, it's gonna be so quick because it's short, but I've been reading it for like a week and I'm like halfway through. And the thing is, the prose is beautiful. I really like the language. There's so many characters and I don't know who any of them are except for like Alexandra and Carl. I don't really care, to be honest. I like the descriptions of the nature and of the West, and I'm in it for that. But the plot of it all, I don't know, and I couldn't be bothered to find out. Always in my cloud goggles. I'm approximately halfway through The Magnificent Ambersons. Like, it's fine. I've been listening to the audiobook for most of it because I went on a long walk. On the whole, I'm just not like enamored with it or anything. I finished The Magnificent Ambersons this morning. It was just so boring to me. It's a story about a very rich family turning into a working class family. Tragedy befalls us all. I was like, good? This family is like racist and the main character is a petulant child and like all of these things. But also it's just like, God forbid you're working class. I'm moving on to Winesburg, Ohio, which is the short story cycle. I just took my dog on a walk. Athena, would you like to say hi, or are you being shy? Why are you being so shy? Now you want to say hi. Hello, lady. I'm listening to it on like 1.7 speed because I just have to get through it. Again, same with Magnificent Ambersons. I don't care about these people. So I'm just really struggling. I know I always say, like, if you don't want to read, don't read. But I just want to be done with it. So I'm just going to power through. I finished Chloe Ting, and I'm made of Jell-O. Ma'am, I've made a decision, and that is that I'm not going to finish this book. It is stressing me out. I'm dreading it. I don't like it. I get the gist of what the book is trying to say, so I'm going to DNF it. I'm sorry if you were really waiting for an in-depth review of Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. I hate to have disappointed you. You know what? This channel is not about torturing myself to read things I don't want to read. It's about trying to read in different and new ways and seeing what I like and what I learn. And what I learned this time is that I don't like that book.
let's talk about these books. Overall, I don't know what was happening. Maybe everybody was just too busy surviving the war, and that is valid, but I do wish they could have done a little bit better. Let's go in order, and that way we can start with the one I liked the most, which was The Secret Garden. This book was very cute, very magical. Definitely had some British imperialist vibes at the beginning, and whenever Mary talked about her time in India, which was decidedly not cute. However, the way that Burnett writes about the magic of nature and the magic of this secret garden and this found family that this young girl finds after her parents die of cholera, it was just chef's kiss. It made me want to be outside so much. The way that she writes about nature and its healing powers just feels so true to me. One thing that I thought was really interesting was that there's this metaphor throughout the book about the world being an orange and how you have to share the orange slices, like you can't just take it all for yourself. I don't know if Frances Hodgson Burnett was like shading the British Empire, or if she didn't recognize the irony in writing about how no one person, no one group can like dominate the entire world. It has to be shared. It was overall really sweet, and it definitely created a world that I was excited to get into whenever I sat down to read it. And it made me notice little things when I would go outside. It really talks about all of the different parts of nature being equal and important and connected, and I love that. Then I read Oh Pioneers. Athena did not like it because she tore it up, and Athena was not alone, I'll be honest. This book was such a slog. The thing is, I really liked the writing style. There were lots of quotes that were really pretty. I underlined quite a lot, but I did not care about any of the characters. Also, you had to meet and get to know like 20 characters in a 100-page book. I did not feel connected to any of them because I didn't get to spend enough time with any of them. I do kind of want to read the other two in the series though. One, because one of my best friends loves my Antonia, so maybe that one's better. And then The Song of the Lark is my favorite painting of all time. It's in the Art Institute in Chicago. When I lived there, I would literally just go and like stare at it, and it makes me cry when I see it in person, and I love it very much. And I had no idea that it was based off that Willa Cather book. I definitely understand why it's stood the test of time in terms of being a portrait of the American West and what immigrants were experiencing as they were expanding westward into their homesteads. The difficulty of deciding or gambling whether or not to move to a city and try to make it there instead, or stay out west and persevere through like seasons of bad crops to hopefully eventually make a profit. I think that's interesting, and I think that it definitely has discussions in here that I'm sure paint an important picture of American life back then, but I didn't feel fully immersed. Next, I read The Magnificent Ambersons by Booth Tarkington. Everything I read about this book before I read the actual book was about how it's all about how this fictionalized version of Indianapolis experiences the automobile age and the introduction of industrialization into their community. It is about that. It's also just about this family and what this family is experiencing, the Ambersons. I don't know, I thought it was gonna have maybe more explicit social commentary than it did, I guess. I thought it was pretty boring. The only character I liked was Lucy Morgan, and she was not in it enough. Basically, it's about a rich family that loses most of their status and becomes working class. I was like, that should happen. You should not be the only family in this town that has money. Like I don't believe in that. I listened to a lot of it on a walk with my dog, and like that was a pleasurable experience. I think mostly because I was on a walk with my dog and less because of the book. There were moments in this of really great writing. There's a continued metaphor in this book that I think is worth pointing out because I think it is interesting in terms of the decade in which it was written. The main character's mother talks about how time and the things that happen to us are like the sky and smoke. She says, I mean, the things that we have and that we think are so solid, they're like smoke. And time is like the sky that the smoke disappears into. I bring this up because one, it was my favorite moment in the whole book. I love that quote. I was like, that is a banging metaphor. I also think that smoke was often used as a metaphor during the industrial and post-industrial age to symbolize the industrialization of America. I think it's interesting to look at through that lens because this family is experiencing their old money and their status sort of disappearing into time. The smoke is what will come and replace it. This industrialization of America, maybe eventually that will also disappear into time as we keep progressing further and further. So these massive things that are happening to us that seem like such change and such progress will eventually seem so archaic and primitive. And I think that's a really interesting metaphor. And I think it's just a really good observation of how the passing of time as a human being feels. It all disappears eventually. And you can look at that in a very hopeless lens and think nothing really matters. Why am I here? Look at it as a really freeing thing. Nothing really matters in the end. Today, flowers are blooming outside and Harry Styles is releasing a new album in May. That's all I need to get through my day, and that's okay. Finally, we have Winesburg, Ohio. I hated it. I DNF'd it. I did not like it. This book reminded me of the moment in Gilmore Girls when Paris comes to Stars Hollow and she's like, we have to expose the seedy underbelly of small town America.
We are going to blow the lid off the seedy underbelly of small town life.
Sherwood Anderson's thesis statement is, yes, Paris, there is a seedy underbelly in small town America. But overall, I literally found this painful to read and I was listening to it as an audiobook. I could not stay focused to it for more than 20 seconds at a time. Overall, the 1910s were not a pop-in time in terms of literature. I'm so excited to get to the 20s. I'm thinking about doing a Roaring 20s video and then also a Harlem Renaissance video. Like this video if you liked it. Comment down below if you have any suggestions for me to read in the 1920s or the Harlem Renaissance. If you want to join me for my book club, Discord, live streams, and more, you can join my Patreon at the link in the description. I launched it yesterday and I'm already having fun talking to everybody in the Discord. When this is posted, you should only have a couple more days to vote in what our first book club read is going to be. You can click the link in my description and get 65% off your first pair at classesusa.com. All my socials will be linked down below as always, and in case you haven't heard it today, I love you.